Another thing we would have that would be important right there is the impeachment of political leaders for deceiving the people. That would be an awesome thing to bring to the table in modern politics now, wouldn't it? Persia, meanwhile, was occupied with a rebellion in Egypt, and many men tried to forget the no longer imminent danger. But Themistocles did not forget. During the respite, which lasted for 10 years, he worked steadily for two objects: an Athens purge of collaborators and an increased navy, able to hold its own, at least in narrow waters, against the Phoenicians who fought for Persia. The Athenian democratic constitution contained one highly original provision, with a view to the peaceful elimination of any future would-be errors. Cleisthenes is said to have laid down that at a fixed meeting of the assembly every winter the people should vote on the question whether there was any citizen who should be removed. If the majority answered yes, a kind of election was held. Furors? Oh, okay. If the majority answered yes, a kind of election was held in the spring. Every citizen who chose wrote the name of his chief political bugbear on an ostracon, a piece of broken pottery, the waste paper of the ancient world, as it has been called, and, subject to a quorum of 6,000 voters, the recipient of the most votes went into honorable exile for 10 years. The process was called potsherding, ostrakismos. So far this weapon had not been used, which causes some scholars to doubt whether it was Cleisthenes' invention, as the tradition says, or more recent. In any case, it was Themistocles who brought it into use. In 487, Pericles, the archon of 496 and leader of the Pisistratide party, was ostracized. In the same year, a law of great significance for the further democratization of the state was passed. Henceforth, instead of electing annually an archon or regent, a king or a religious head of state, a commander-in-chief, and 6 junior archons whose duty were chiefly judicial, the people would elect 500 candidates, 50 from each of the 10 tribes, and from these 9 archons and their secretary, 1 official from each tribe, would be chosen by lot. Naturally, after this, the archons rapidly lost prestige and influence. The war leader, in particular, was at once a mere cipher in the hands of his 10 generals, who were still directly elected. The main object at the time is probably that the chief executive positions might not be always in the hands of political leaders. All of this naturally went over the head of the child Pericles. But in 486 he was brought up against politics really sharply. His uncle Megacles was part-shirted, allegedly as being compromised on the side of the ex-tyrants. No doubt his friends remarked that the people were showing great ingratitude to the memory of Cleisthenes. Megacles himself did not take his fate tragically. He went off to Delphi, taking the horses with him. They won their chariot race, and there still survives the little choral lyric which a young poet of Thebes, Pindar, wrote for the suitable fee to celebrate the occasion. Pindar had already written a very beautiful dirge for the funeral of old Hippocrates, Pericles' father, of which some lines survive. The last great poet of the age of the nobles, which was now passing, was thus well known to the family of the future democratic leader. When Pericles was 9, there was a sharper blow still. At this time it was his own father who was to go. Xanthippus, it appears, had always kept clear of the ex-tyrant's friends, but he was a rival to Themistocles, and was Megacles' brother-in-law. Last of all, the leaders of Cleisthenes' old party went Aristides in 483 BCE. After a violent struggle over Themistocles' proposal to spend a large surplus just realized from the state's silver mines on increasing the navy. Even now, such is human nature. Themistocles, in order to pass his navy bill, had to point not to the distant land, as some thought, hypothetical danger from the east, but to the prospect of crushing a parochial enemy, the island of Aegina, the eyesore of the Piraeus, as Pericles later called it, in full view from the coast of Attica, which had an older tradition of sea power than Athens, and till then a larger fleet. With the help of this subterfuge, the ships were ready just in time before the great Persian invasion came in 480, and if many of the crews were still raw, the genius of Themistocles made up for that. The year 480 is Themistocles' year in history. It was he who insisted on fighting as far forward as possible, when most of the Peloponnesians characteristically were in favor of defending only the Peloponnese. He held to the original naval plan of holding the Straits of Artemision off the temple of Artemis at the north at the end of Euboea, even when the land forces fell back from Thessalo, finding, like the British in 1941, that the Mount Olympus or Haliakmon line is not nearly as strong as it sounds from a distance. There the Greeks, with Themistocles, New Athens' navy forming half their entire strength, inflicted heavy loss on the enemy as they slipped, piecemeal, for lack of harbors on the coast of round the corner to the near base near modern Volo, while northeasterly gales on that dangerous coast inflicted the greater damage, including the loss of a whole enemy squadron sent down the east coast of Euboea to cut the Greeks' communication. This execution of Themistocles' plan was made possible at the blocking of the coast road to Greece at Thermopylae at the very last moment by Leonidas, king of Sparta, acting apparently on his own initiative, while the unwilling allied war council at Corinth was still arguing. Finally, there was a grueling fleet action off of Artemision, after which the Greeks were probably in no state to renew the battle, even after the Persian Guard division, with the local guide, had not meanwhile made their way over the mountains to cut the gallant Leonidas. But Themistocles, in retreat, was undismayed. He piled the enemy's Aeonian sailors with subversive propaganda. He nerved the Athenians to evacuate their country and city, to venture all on their feet. He got the allied fleet, including useful reinforcements, sent to Salamis Island to help with the excavation of Athens, and then tricked the Persians into rowing all night to cut their retreat and attacking the narrow straits at dawn. If ever a general change in course of history for the better, Themistocles did so. In all that led up to the victory of Salamis, it is a thrilling story, but the place for its details is not here. And yet, in spite of it all, Themistocles was out of office in 479. What seems to have happened was that when Athens was evacuated, the assembly could not be convened. The ancient and conservative council of the ex-archons, called the Council of the Hill of Aras, or Areopagus, took charge of the administration and settled appointments for the next year. Aristides commanded the Athenian contingent in the army that routed the Persians in central Greece in 479, and Xanthippus in the fleet which destroyed the enemy remnants of the Aegean and liberated Ionia. All political exiles had been recalled in 480. Aristides, a year or two later, was entrusted by the liberated Ionian cities as well as by the Athens with the organization of a league of these cities continued for continued defense or aggression against Persia. The capital of the League was at the holy Isle of Delos, a place chosen for its sanctity, and like Ottawa or Canberra, to avoid jealousy among the important cities. But its executive from the first was Athenian. Both Xanthippus and Aristides were thoroughly